The fact that the way that what you just played here, I hadn't heard Trump utter those words. I'd heard somebody say that he said them, but to hear him say that about they can shoot through the media, the assassins, go ahead and fire, and all those other things you just played, it's like they really believe that the average normal American wants to hear that. They actually believe that we don't like immigrants. We are immigrants. We are all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of immigrants, unless you are African American or unless you're amongst the first peoples that were here. We are all the product of immigrants.
Repeat after me. Donald Trump outsmarted us all. And then there's a little throw up in everyone's mouth.
What happens when you mix a cheeseburger-loving billionaire with zero self-awareness and a documentary filmmaker who's officially had enough? You get a political roast so fiery it deserves its own warning label. Michael Moore just turned Trump into a walking meme all over again. And if you thought Trump's spray tan was the harshest burn of the day, think again. Grab your popcorn, because Moore didn't just call him out. He unloaded a full U-Haul of receipts. You won't believe what he exposed this time.
It's true. I also think that Donald Trump is a big believer in capitalism and free enterprise and the sort of thing that's driven us into the ground, this belief that you can just do whatever you want and it doesn't matter who gets hurt by it. And I don't really see him changing, but I think he knows he's been on TV. You know, I mean, he's a performance artist. He knows what to say.
Michael Moore didn't need to be in the same room with Trump to completely obliterate him. He didn't even have to raise his voice. All it took was a simple gesture, a pointed truth, and suddenly the emperor's orange glow faded away, revealing a bewildered real estate relic, still wondering why that escalator ride back in 2015 didn't end with a mall Santa job.
England, right? They all voted to leave, and now they regret it, and over 4 million of them have signed a petition to have a do-over. They want another election. It ain't gonna happen because you use the ballot as an anger management tool. And now you're fucked. And Pennsylvania and Wisconsin find out after a few months in office that President Trump wasn't going to do a damn thing for them. It'll be too late to do anything about it. But I get it.
Enjoying this video? Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Trump, the only man capable of bankrupting a casino twice, is once again out here playing the role of a misunderstood genius. Meanwhile, Michael Moore, armed with nothing but facts, a camera, and a fully functional sense of decency, has turned his career into a demolition derby of Trumpian delusion.
None of what he said was true, but that didn't matter. He knew how to communicate to the American public. He knew how to tell them what they wanted to hear. He went all over Wisconsin the last week saying, I'm gonna make you all rich. I'm gonna make you all rich. You're gonna make you all rich. Well, geez, who wouldn't like to hear that, right? Right, ma'am, how do I look tonight? How do I look? What would you say? Amazing, thank you. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it really made me feel good. And that's how he worked, right? He knew how to do it because he was a TV star. First year, I'm talking about The Apprentice, by the way, the looks on your face, you know. He was the host of a show called The Apprentice. How many people in here watch The Apprentice every week when Donald Trump was on? Can I see a show of 1, 2, 3, 4 in the balcony?
Moore didn't take down Trump with punches. That would have given him too much credit. Instead, he dismantled him like an old IKEA cabinet, carefully, piece by piece, following a manual Trump clearly never read, mostly because it had too many words and not nearly enough gold on the cover.
Donald Trump came to the Detroit Economic Club and stood there in front of the Ford Motor executives and said, if you close these factories as you're planning to do in Detroit and build them in Mexico, I'm going to put a 35% tariff
on those cars when you send it back, and nobody's going to buy it. And it's why every beaten down, nameless, forgotten working stiff who used to be part of what was called the middle class loves Trump. He is the human Molotov cocktail that they've been waiting for. The human hand grenade that they can legally throw into the system that stole.
You've got Trump, the self-proclaimed master of deals, whose best negotiation tactic seems to be shouting fake news at reality. And then there's Michael Moore, strolling in with sneakers and a baseball cap, pointing at Flint, Michigan, then at Mar-a-Lago and saying, "See the problem yet? Or should I draw it in Crayola?" Moore doesn't just expose hypocrisy, he turns it into a full-length feature. Trump hosts rallies like it's 1933 and he's auditioning for a role no one asked for, while Moore makes documentaries that accidentally trigger nationwide existential crises. And their followers? Trump's base treats him like a GPS with a broken antenna, constantly leading them into a swamp. Yet they keep insisting he's just taking the scenic route to greatness. Meanwhile, Moore's fans are sipping cold brew, registering voters for the next election, and fact-checking everything, including their grandma's potato salad recipe.
The fact that the way that what you just played here, I hadn't heard Trump utter those words. I'd heard somebody say that he said them, but to hear him say that about they can shoot through the media, the assassins, go ahead and fire, and all those other things you just played, it's like they really believe that the average normal American wants to hear that. They actually believe that we don't like immigrants. We are immigrants. We are all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of immigrants, unless you are African American or unless you're amongst the first peoples that were here. We are all the product of immigrants.
Every time Trump says something that sounds like it was translated from English to ego and back again by a drunken fortune cookie, Michael Moore pulls out another receipt. You can almost hear the paper shredder in Trump Tower groaning under the weight of shredded ethics, accountability, and expired NDAs. Trump keeps trying to brand himself as a man of the people, which, coming from a guy who thought serving fast food in the White House was an act of patriotic culinary diplomacy, feels less relatable and more like late-stage parody. Meanwhile, Moore has spent decades trekking through the ruins of Reaganomics, NAFTA, and Big Pharma like a working-class Indiana Jones. But instead of unearthing treasure, he's digging up corruption, greed, and entire cities that haven't had clean water since the last time Trump read a book. It's like, oh wow, I just questioned the meaning of American democracy. Impactful. One incites chants at rallies, the other sparks thoughts and questions. Guess which one terrifies the GOP more?
He's appointed a number of generals and a number of CEOs, head of corporations, to be in his cabinet and to run things. I mean, that's who he is. That's what he ran on. That's what he stands for. And that's what we've got right now. We've got an awful situation. And our only hope right now, really, because we hold no power, even though we're the majority, we hold no power. So our hope is to basically try to discombobulate him as much as possible. He's easily distracted. He has a very thin skin. And if we can just be like a swarm of bees around his head for the next couple of years, maybe we can prevent some of the damage he's going to do.
Watching Trump lead is like watching a reality show contestant who still thinks he's on season 1, even though he's been voted off 5 times and the camera crew has already packed up. Moore's documentaries are the exact opposite. No seasons, no gimmicks, just straight to syndication in the Department of Common Sense. Trump's obsession with walls is especially adorable when you remember he couldn't even firewall his own Twitter account. The man built his empire on skyscrapers and lawsuits, yet somehow forgot to build a personality. Meanwhile, Moore's brand is made entirely of uncomfortable truths and the shattered dreams of every lobbyist who hoped no one would notice. Moore doesn't need to rage tweet. He just releases a film, drops it in theaters, and watches entire spin rooms implode like they accidentally read a book without pictures.
Not going anywhere. These Republicans seem to have no interest in impeaching him.
and I'm sure they've already done the polling and surveying their districts. These districts are gerrymandered in such a way to guarantee their reelection, and I think they already know that most of them are going to get reelected, and they'll maintain control, and they're not going to impeach him.
Now, your show is rocking the aisles in New York, but that's easy, isn't it? Because, you know, New York is very much against Trump. But shouldn't you be in the Rust Belt and trying to rattle their chairs?
No, actually the problem is New York. The Clinton campaign and the liberals and the Democrats here who completely blew this election.
Trump keeps talking about draining the swamp like he didn't personally import half the swamp creatures himself, complete with bonuses and commemorative MAGA mugs. Meanwhile, Michael Moore has been documenting that swamp since before Trump even learned how to pronounce infrastructure. And unlike the president, Moore never needed a teleprompter to get through it. When Trump yells "witch hunt," Moore simply hands him a mirror. You want to hunt? Here's every broken promise, every tax loophole, every failed business where the only thing that made money was the Red Hat factory. Trump runs his presidency like a late-night infomercial, while Moore sits in the editing room turning all that chaos into Emmy-worthy material. One man's meltdown is another man's documentary gold.
No, people care. Again, the majority do not like Donald Trump. He lost by 10.5 million. 10.5 million people didn't vote for him. That's the 3 million for Hillary and the 7.5 million to the Greens and the Libertarians. So that's 10.5 million that did not want Trump as their president. And but he's still very popular in these minority of.
The irony is that Trump sees himself as the ultimate showman, the ratings king, the spotlight magnet, the "you're fired" tycoon. But Michael Moore keeps proving that to get real attention, you don't need a gold-plated toilet or a catchphrase. You just need the truth, and maybe a montage of billionaires sweating under congressional lighting. Trump can barely handle a tough question from a reporter, while Moore goes head-to-head with gun lobbies, Wall Street, healthcare giants, and entire political parties. Trump whines when Twitter fact-checks him. Moore rolls out charts, graphs, and interviews with the very people Trump pretends don't exist. Trump's idea of patriotism is hugging the flag like it's a long-lost teddy bear. Moore's version is holding the country accountable like a drunk uncle at Thanksgiving, rambling about the good old days again. Guess which one actually believes in democracy?
Because we've known Trump for how many umpteen years. I've been on shows with Trump back in the 90s. I mean, this is a guy who did support Planned Parenthood, who was for gay rights, who you know, he was a big blowhard and he wanted his name on everything, but he also put the ice skating rink back in Central Park. Right. So you know, he's not what he's made himself out to be to these people who voted for him.
Michael Moore gave us uncomfortable truths, real footage that should have come with a box of tissues and a blood pressure warning. Trump, meanwhile, built his sob story empire by playing the victim of everything from the media to mail-in ballots to the wind daring to mess up his comb-over. Moore focused on real victims, laid-off workers, poisoned towns, overworked nurses, and people who don't have the luxury of being airlifted to a private hospital over a sneeze. Trump whined about crowd sizes. Moore documented communities gasping for air. It's not even a contest. One's drama, the other's reality.
I did this in my head. Take those same words you just showed. You are fake news. Put those words in Nixon's mouth. You're fake news. You know? It would have sounded like the paranoid that Nixon was. Put those words in George W. Bush's mouth. You know, you're fake news. It would have sounded defensive and like the little boy. This guy pulls that off, and he pulls it off over and over and over again and confuses the situation with so much. You don't know really, I mean, we don't have enough time here to deal with everything that was said and done.
Trump seems to think that awkwardly dancing to YMCA counts as outreach, while Michael Moore believes documenting the effects of deregulation on struggling communities actually counts as journalism. It's like comparing a firework to a wildfire. One fizzles out in seconds, the other burns down entire systems. The MAGA movement loves to shout about freedom, but only if that freedom comes in red, white, and just a touch of fascism. Moore's version of freedom is the kind that asks uncomfortable questions and makes the powerful squirm. Trump hugs police officers while shouting about law and order. Moore embraces whistleblowers who risk everything just to tell the truth.
No reason that he should ever go back into the Oval Office again. We live in a very different country now, different from even the 8 years ago when he was first elected. Elected thanks in part to Michigan, because the candidate, the Democratic Party, yes, okay, yes, that bad. The shame is still hanging over me, but as a Michigander, but the candidate and her campaign made a decision in 2016 to not visit Michigan, to not visit Wisconsin, and we lost Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and that was the whole difference right there. And now, any analyst that you look at for this year's election says, and Michelle Goldberg.
Trump's scandals happen so often, they might as well be classified as a weather pattern. Moore's scandals, on the other hand, come from making people uncomfortable by being right too often. One is allergic to facts, the other wields them like a sledgehammer. Even Trump's attempts to be relatable are hilariously tragic. He eats fast food not to connect with the people, but because he thinks cooking is a liberal conspiracy. Moore, he eats fast food while interviewing someone about minimum wage. That's the difference. One's a gimmick, the other's a statement. Trump once claimed he was the only one who could fix America, which is funny coming from a man who couldn't even fix an umbrella. Moore never claimed to be a savior, just a guy with a camera, a question, and a solid pair of walking shoes.
President-elect doesn't seem engaged at all. He's more engaged with tweeting about Alec Baldwin on SNL.
Yeah.
5 hours after the show finishes at 1 a.m. By 6 a.m., he's not funny, sad, not watchable. And it's like, you've got time for that? And you haven't taken one of the national security briefings? You've taken only 3 of them in this first month?
Yeah.
I mean, my friends, if something happens, a Donald Trump president, is in his presidency, he is going to react in a way that talk about taking away people's rights, talking about clamping down in an authoritarian way, in the way that he likes to think about, and nobody's going to be able to discuss then.
One of them dodges questions like they're playing dodgeball with lawsuits. The other welcomes questions like they're the opening credits of another award-winning expose. Trump thinks accountability is a brand of cologne. Moore sees it as the foundation of a functioning democracy. When Trump leaves a room, he leaves behind confusion, tweets, and unpaid bills. When Moore leaves, he leaves conversations, realizations, and an urgent need to Google whether that one senator really voted against clean water. Spoiler, they did. Trump's legacy is a montage of angry speeches, gold-plated mediocrity, and enough lawsuits to stage a courthouse musical. Moore's legacy is a timeline of truths America tried to ignore until they showed up in a movie theater with a $12 ticket and a gut punch of reality.
Trump came to the Detroit Economic Club and stood there in front of the Ford Motor executives and said, if you close these factories as you're planning to do in Detroit and build them in Mexico, I'm going to put a 35% tariff on those cars when you send them back, and nobody's going to buy them.
Trump wants statues. Moore wants answers. Trump craves cheers. Moore seeks change. Trump wants to be remembered. Moore wants the country to be better. And maybe that's the greatest destruction of all. Michael Moore doesn't take down Trump by yelling, mocking, or grandstanding. He does it by reminding everyone that true leadership is about responsibility, not ratings. That patriotism means showing up even when it's hard, even when it's messy, and especially when it's unpopular. Moore captured the bloopers, the budget cuts, and the behind-the-scenes chaos, and then rolled the credits over a nation that almost forgot it deserved better.
Blow, Steve Blow,
Bob Blow, Billy Bob Blow, all the blows get to go and blow up the whole goddamn system because it's your right. Trump's election is going to be the biggest feud ever recorded in human history. And it will feel.
And as Trump struggles desperately to cling to relevance with all the grip strength of a soggy paper towel, Moore just keeps filming because nothing exposes a narcissist more thoroughly than seeing them for exactly who they are in high-definition surround sound, complete with a fact-checking crawl at the bottom. Moore quietly loads his next project into Final Cut, ready to remind us once again that the real threat to America isn't coming from the border, the media, or the wind turbines. It comes from anyone who mistakes volume for vision, wealth for wisdom, and power for purpose.